Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 56. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over a team that is like mostly blue, but we also have the Grimmsnarl, who is a little bit more purple, and we have a microwave. So that is in fact the theme of the team that we're going with. I mean, really, these are just like 6 Pokemon that I think all work together pretty well, as I used Gyarados for the starting point for this team, but Gyarados doesn't really feel like a key Pokemon on this team, so we're going to kind of step away from that idea. But starting off with Gyarados, it's kind of neat because we have the Moxie ability, which we're doing closed team sheet things, so people might think that we're actually Intimidate on Gyarados. But Moxie is nice because if we get one KO, Gyarados can really just start stacking the attack boost in combination with the Dragon Dance, which hopefully we get a turn 2 set up, and then once we get the kill, we get the Moxie to give us another attack boost, and we're clear Amulets, so there's no way for the opponent to get rid of those attack boosts except for like Clear Smog or Haze. And for Gyarados' moveset, I decided to go for the Waterfall, just because it's good water-type stab, and we are going to be using Terra Flying Terra Blast, since Gyarados doesn't get a good flying-type move to use as a physical attack. Next up we have Grimmsnarl, and this Grimmsnarl is just a pretty simple dual screen set with the Light Clay in order to extend the duration of our screens, and we also have the Thunder Wave for a bit of speed control, and we have the Spirit Break for lowering the special attack of the opponent. And since Grimmsnarl is Prankster, we're going to get priority on all of our status moves, which is everything except Spirit Break, and we're Terra Ghost so that we can maybe dodge a Fake Out with Grimmsnarl. Next up we have another Prankster in the Riolu, and this Riolu is pretty simple to the one that we used way back a while, but this Riolu is changing things up a bit with the move Quick Guard, which we can use to protect our allies from priority moves, which has some pretty niche uses. I mean, I don't think Quick Guard's that great of a move, but it can surprise opponents sometimes, and we have the Screech in order to make it so that all of our physical attackers can deal more physical damage into opponents, and it also suppresses body press mods a little bit. And of course, with most fighting types, we have the Coaching, and since we're Prankster, we get priority on every single one of our moves. As well as Riolu is going to be using the Cover Cloak in order to make it so that we're not feeling the secondary effects of moves, and we're Terra Dark so that we're not getting Prankster taunted mostly. Next up we got Garchomp, and Garchomp is just a really strong ground type, as it's probably the best ground type in the format right now. But our Garchomp is going to be using full, pretty much ground-type damage, as we have the Earthquake, which can do good spread damage, and we also have the option to go for that single-target Stomping Tantrum, which will double in power if we don't get to use a move in the previous turn, and we have the Dragon Claw for whenever we can't afford to click a ground-type move into something, we can hopefully click good damage with our Dragon Claw, and we're going to be Life Orb on Garchomp just to get that raw amount of damage right off the bat. And we're Terra Ground to further boost the power of our ground tank damage, and we're Rough Skin just because we don't really have a use for being Sandvale since we're not a sand team, so we're Rough Skin, but we can also maybe catch a Mousehold off guard. In our next slot here we have Corviknight, and Corviknight is just a very bulky steel flying type, as we do have 2 of its stabs in the Brave Bird and the Iron Head for some pretty good damage, and we also have Tailwind support, and since we are Mirror Armor, it also gives us some play into Intimidate mons, because they'll get intimidated back. As well as we have the Citrus Berry just for a little bit of extra health, and we're Terrafire just because fire gives us nice resistances into, well, mainly fire was the thing that we were previously weak to. And lastly on this team, I decided to pick Rotom Heat because it was a Levitate mon, and we already had Gyarados and Corviknight, so it made the most sense to put those two next to the Garchomp, who could just click Earthquake into everything, hopefully. But Rotom Heat has some good stabs in the Volt Switch and the Overheat, but we also have some support moves tacked on in the Will-O-Wisp and the Eerie Impulse for lowering both the physical and special attacks damage that it does to us. And we also have the Rocky Helmet just because Rotom is like kind of decently bulky, but we've mostly made this Rotom fast, so if something is going to fake out into Rotom, we can at least give them a little bit of Rocky Helmet damage. But that is the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles.
So first up, we have a team with 3 starters, but they're all 3 pretty competitively viable starters right now. But the most threatening thing for me was them leading Hisuian, Typhlosion, and Whimsicott just going for the Tailwind, or they could lead Farigiraf and Blood Moon or Saluna and go for the Trick Room. So they decided to lead Masquerana and Whimsicott, and this is pretty okay for us because Grimmsnarl is going to be able to get out some good screens at least, as we're going to have Garchomp Protect, kind of predicting that we were going to get Flower Tricked, and so we get to stop the Flower Trick. And I went for the Spirit Break to hopefully deal super effective damage into Meowscarada, but because I went for the Grass typing, and now we get to Paralyze it, which will make it maybe slower than Garchomp, but we get the Paraturn if it wasn't already slower than Garchomp. So we get to get the Dragon Claw off with Garchomp, but they still have Tailwind up, which is not great for us as they bring in the Primarina. So Grimmsnarl gets up the light screen as Whimsicott attacks into Garchomp, and I thought maybe they would Encore on this turn, so I swapped in Corviknight. Also, Corviknight just deals with Primarina a little bit better, as Primarina takes a Paraturn, unfortunately, and the opponent just decides to give up off of that. So I'm pretty sure in this game, the Gyarados was our 4th Mon, and even if they had the Hisuian Typhlosion in the back, Gyarados could easily deal with that, and if it was like Blood Moon or Saluna, or they led Farigiraf, I think Grimmsnarl's screens and Spirit Breaks would allow us to survive for long enough with our other 2 Pokemon that we could deal with those 2 Pokemon mainly. Up next, we have a Sand team that also uses Ampharos, and I don't think we got to see Ampharos. But they immediately lead Incineroar and Tyranitar, and we lead Grimmsnarl and Corviknight, as I read that Corviknight was the biggest threat into their team, except for Ampharos, but Ampharos can be dealt with Garchomp pretty easily. So they immediately fake out into Corviknight as we get the Reflect with Grimmsnarl, and they go for the Rock Slide here, but because of the Reflect and the fact that Corviknight's just neutral to the Rock Slide, doesn't do too much damage into Corviknight. And now they decide to swap in the Amoonguss as I get the light screen, and we crit the Amoonguss with Iron Head, which is pretty nice, but the Incineroar knocks off our berry, so we don't get any more healing this game, unfortunately. Brave Bird's gonna come out, and that crit probably did not matter on Amoonguss because the Brave Bird just does so much damage as they Will-O-Wisp into Corviknight, and we get the Spirit Break to chip Incineroar for a bit of damage, and they reveal their last Pokemon is Lycanroc here. So I kind of read that, like, Corviknight's not gonna be helping us out a lot at this point, mostly because it was burned, so I decided to swap in Riolu here so that when I can bring back in Grimmsnarl, we can immediately start coaching the Grimmsnarl. Since everything that's left is a physical attacker at this point, I felt pretty confident that Grimmsnarl could just take the hits, and it does take the hits pretty decently here, and we Spirit Break Lycanroc, but unfortunately Lycanroc doesn't get KO'd quite as close as I want it to. But we get another coaching on the Grimmsnarl, and I predicted that they were going to swap out Incineroar, so I did Spirit Break into that slot, but also the Lycanroc ends itself because of its Life Orb attacking into Riolu, and the Tyranitar is actually Focus Sash, so it gets to live the hit, which is kind of annoying, but we have Rotom in the back, and I decided to Terra Ghost Grimmsnarl so that it doesn't get faked out, as the Rotom gets to Volt Switch, and the Spirit Break will be redirected into Incineroar, so we guarantee got to take out Tyranitar that turn, and the opponent just wants to play things out here, I guess, as they Will-O-Wisp into the Grimmsnarl, but the Spirit Break is going to finish off Incineroar. So I feel like that battle kind of shows off one of the big parts about this team, is since everything is a physical attacker except for Rotom, even the support component in Grimmsnarl can really benefit from the coaching boost and just use it to win the game in the end. Next up, we have a team with an opposing Gyarados, but they also have quite a few, not necessarily unique mons, but also mons that you don't get to see super often in the Gengar and the Vikavolt. But I decided to lead Rotom Heat and Grimmsnarl, since Rotom Heat deals with a lot of their Pokemon, except for mainly Incineroar and Gallade. But they end up leading Gengar and Whimsicott, which I'm pretty okay with, and they immediately decide to Terra Ghost their Whimsicott, perhaps reading a fire type attack here, but the Overheat still does so much damage to Whimsicott that we can probably knock it out with one attack. We get the Paralysis on Gengar, as the Whimsicott reveals it has Endeavor for Rotom, so Rotom's actually going to get taken out here, but the Whimsicott also takes Rocky Helmet damage, so it's going to get taken out this turn, as we can Volt Switch out Rotom in order to get rid of its special attack drops, and now we can bring in the Gyarados, as they reveal they have Vikavolt in the back, but Vikavolt's pretty slow, so I thought Garchomp would outspeed it, and we get good Dragon damage into it, since we can't attack it with ground damage, but the Gengar also has Icy Wind, which unfortunately is going to speed drop Garchomp because we're not clear Amulet, but they decide to Discharge with Vikavolt, and end up getting rid of their own Gengar for us, but now now they get to bring in Gallade, and I figure Garchomp's kind of dead here, and we kind of need Gyarados to survive the discharge behind the light screen, and that happens, but they paralyze both Mons, and Gyarados gets full paralyzed, which is not great. But Rotom is theoretically the fastest thing on the field since Gallade is paralyzed. Even if they were like Choice Scarf Gallade, the paralysis means that they don't get to outspeed Rotom this turn. And even if they did, they already locked in Leaf Blade, which actually probably would still kill Rotom, but they would take some Rocky Helmet damage from it at least. But the Rotom is going to read that the main threat is the Vikavolt here, so we get to take that out with the Overheat. And they Sacred Sword into Rotom, which also causes them to take Rocky Helmet damage. And Gyarados, thankfully, is faster than Gallade, since they're not max speed. But we get the Terra Flying Terra Blast into Gallade like I wanted last turn. Next up, we got a Dondozo team, but they also have mostly offensive elements in like the Dragonite and the Talonflame, and I'm really not sure how my team deals with Extreme Speed Dragonite other than like Corviknight, because the Dragonite is going to move before even our Prankster Mons because the Extreme Speed is +2 priority. So I lead Riolu and Gyarados, kind of hoping that they don't lead Dragonite, but they do in fact lead Dragonite, so we're already at a kind of bad start, and they do start with Extreme Speed, but Gyarados at least lives it, as Talonflame sets up the Tailwind, and we get to coaching with Gyarados and Waterfall into Talonflame in order to get rid of that, so that was like the biggest threat to Corviknight at that point. And the Dondozo is going to protect on this turn, as I also protect with Gyarados, but I think they read that as they get to Extreme Speed right into Riolu in order to take it out, and now we have Grimmsnarl, so I don't actually think I brought Corviknight to this game, because I remember bringing Garchomp in here, but they immediately form full Dondozo mode, and we Thunder Wave into Dondozo, so we can at least paralyze it, and they just Wave Crash into Grimmsnarl in order to take down its health quite a bit. And I tried waterfalling into Dragonite because I thought this game was kinda over at this point because of the bad matchup, but we actually get to double protect with Garchomp and Gyarados here, so that Dondozo is forced to now be slower than both of our Mons since we're outside the Tailwind, and we Stomping Tantrum the Dondozo for good damage, and we go for the Waterfall, and we get the Flinch, so we have both the Para and the Flinch working against the Dondozo at this point. And I thought I might catch an attack this turn and try and get some extra Waterfall damage, but we don't get that as they just get extra Leftovers damage, and Garchomp goes for the Earthquake here, and we get the Earthquake on maybe the 4th hit on the Dondozo, but so fortunately we got a little bit lucky there, but with our Para and flinching on the Gyarados, I want to say that like the odds of us Para flinching the Dondozo to death was not crazy low, because it probably would have just taken 1 or 2 more Earthquakes in order to take down the Dondozo. But because of that, the Garchomp is able to go for Earthquake, which takes out Tatsugiri, which means that Tatsugiri is not Choice Scarf, and the Dragonite didn't decide to lock in the Extreme Speed, and because Gyarados is currently ×2 attack, Gyarados just gets to clap Dragonite for all of its health. So a little bit of luck did end up getting us out of that game, but whenever you're playing Dondozo, your worst enemy is the luck. And that's one of the main downfalls of using Dondozo. And lastly, we have a team of all pretty niche Mons except for like Alolan Ninetales and Clefairy. I'm not really quite sure what they're doing. Like Honchkrow has Super Luck, so it can maybe do critical hit things, and the Hisuian Samurott also has a bunch of crit moves that can boost with its sharpness, but I wasn't quite sure where the crit boost was coming from, except for maybe the Goodra with Dragon Shear. So I decided to lead Riolu and Corviknight just because I thought Corviknight would be the best Pokemon to take attacks, and also we're pretty good into the Alolan Ninetales here. So we decided coaching the Corviknight just in case the Goodra is also Body Press, but the Alolan Ninetales is Sash as we Iron Head into it, and the Goodra is Thunderbolt, and it immediately paralyzes us on the Thunderbolt, which is not good, as they swap out into the Exeggutor, and we get in Rotom here as the Goodra Thunderbolts again. But they decide to swap out into Samurott here as we Eerie Impulse the Goodra so that Corviknight can live the Thunderbolt, and we Brave Bird into what was previously Exeggutor, but we still do a lot of good damage into Corviknight considering we're only +1, and that wasn't even a super effective hit while they're behind the Aurora Veil. And Samurott tries to go for Sucker Punch into Corviknight in order to pick it off, but we also missed the Will-O-Wisp into Samurott, so not a great turn here as they swapped in Exeggutor. Sacred Sword is going to take out the Corviknight as Expanding Force does decent damage into Rotom, but now we can bring back in Riolu, and I'm going to protect Riolu this turn as we just overheat into Exeggutor, and they tried to Sacred Sword into Riolu, which is pretty nice. As Ninetales is going to come back in, and it's going to be able to set the Aurora Veil again, and I quick guarded this turn just so the Samurott wouldn't be able to deal Sucker Punch damage into the Rotom here, but the Moonblast is going to lower the Rotom's health, and they didn't go for Sucker Punch, but I mean, the Quick Guard still would have prevented that. As now we can bring in Grimmsnarl, and we can Terra Ghost Grimmsnarl, and Screech the Goodra down a little bit just to lower its defense for Grimmsnarl. And after we get up Light Screen, we're not taking too much special attack damage. Now this time we just have to cross our fingers that we are not getting Blizzard Frozen, and Muddy Water misses Riolu, and it doesn't accuracy drop Grimmsnarl, and even if it did accuracy drop Grimmsnarl, that's only a 75% hit there, but we at least get to double into Goodra with this Screech and the Spirit Break, and that does massive damage to Goodra, who decided to terrestrialize us into water for maybe more Muddy Water damage is what it looks like, but they do get the accuracy drop on Grimmsnarl, but thankfully Grimmsnarl still hits the attacks. But since they terrestrialize Goodra to water, we still have Rotom in the back with 19% HP, and since Goodra is special tanky, it's not crazy to think that maybe Goodra would live the Volt Switch, but I would kind of doubt it. But yeah, that was the blue and purple and microwave team. Again, it's mostly like Garchomp damage with good like support in Grimmsnarl and Riolu, and then Gyarados, Corviknight, and Rotom are all mons that avoid taking damage from the Earthquake, but they can all do good damage themselves in order to help support things that Garchomp is weak to. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.